Good morning, everyone. Lots going on, and really lots more than usual going on. Yesterday, Mr. Morneau had an ethics violation investigation opened, and yesterday the questions started for we. So National Post is talking about this 23 hours ago, yesterday. Ethics Commissioner extends we charity investigation to Finance Minister Bill Morneau. How often do you get, and what would happen if in Liberal land, Stephen Harper and his finance minister were both under ethical investigations at the same time? The press would have lost their mind. I mean, a lot of people would be upset. A lot of people should be upset. Isn't it interesting that it doesn't really seem like people are all that upset? The press is getting a little angry now. But anyways, we're moving on. Sitting prime minister, his finance minister, ethics violations. These guys clearly, and this is the third major ethics violation for Trudeau. Two of them came back that he had breached ethics, the ethics laws. And like, that's not, I guess it's kind of a slap on the wrist. Like the biggest fine you can get is $500. And Trudeau is a very rich man. So, you know, oh no, $500, shucks, right? I didn't get to give $1 billion to the We charity. Right. So here, and as I said, the We charity thing is the scandal that keeps on giving. It's easy to understand. He tried to give his cronies, his people connected to him, his family and his friends, money. Katie Telford, Amanda Alvaro, his mom, right? All of these people and their charities. Craig and his brother Kielburger. I can't remember. Michael Kielburger? I can't remember the other one. All of these people were going to benefit from Canadian taxpayer dollars through this program. And as I said, I maybe didn't. I started this video a bunch of times. I'm trying to get my sound levels right. I hope it's right. As I said, this is a very interesting 3 hours to watch. I haven't got through all of it yet. Some of it's really dry. The Liberals keep going back to the restating what they were trying to do. The first 3 or 4 minutes, Chagger doesn't quite get on her. She doesn't get in her groove, and so she has trouble answering questions, and she has some, they talk over each other. Charlie Angus starts the questioning, and they talk over each other, and there's people who are bringing in points of order and all sorts of crazy stuff. This is the most important part that I thought I'm going to show you guys today. The question is, who else did the public service bring to the table with regards to we? And then we're going to watch how she answers the same question to Vasi Kapoulis. It's really interesting because she implies one answer here, and I'll show you what I mean, but it gives a very different answer here. Here is Mr. Barrett, and he is asking his question. Here we go.
Only We Charity could deliver this program?
It was a recommendation that was provided to me in writing. After a lot of rigor and discussion, I accepted the recommendation. Yes, it was provided to me in writing.
The question was it only We Charity that was recommended?
When the public service made a recommendation to myself, yes, it was the organization that was recommended.
Were you given any options as to how this program could be administered or which organizations could administer it? Options?
I asked numerous questions for options, and after the public service did their due diligence, it was a recommendation that We Charity was the organization, the only organization that could deliver the program in the timeline needed to the scale that we desired.
How was the decision to award We Charity to implement this program taken if no other organizations were presented as options?
Mr. Chair, I think it's also important to acknowledge that we are in an unprecedented challenging time with the pandemic. We know that all countries are facing challenges. It's something we've never had to address, including the public service. The public service, I'm confident, did their due diligence, made a recommendation. I accepted their recommendation.
Did you discuss awarding this program to...
So she didn't answer the question, right? The question was, the question first was, who else could deliver this program? Was it only We Charity that the public service brought to you? And how was the decision then taken if there was no other organizations involved? And that was the question she didn't want to answer. As soon as that question was asked, she jumps to, we're in unprecedented times, Mr. Chair, and this pandemic is unprecedented. I can't answer this question is the translation. And I thought, man, that's very interesting, right? So the public service first came back with only one organization that could possibly deliver this program, and it was not them, despite the fact that they're doing it now, right? And that recommendation was obviously accepted by Miss Chagger. She's made a point a couple of times to say, yes, I got the recommendation in writing. It was in writing. So I guess that's important to her. She feels like it was important enough to get in writing, right? So there you go. It was the only one, and that's what the public service said. And she just said, yeah, that's great. No problem. Let's go for this program. And now here's Vasi Kopoulos asking, what other options were presented to you? Did you ask her other options? I think it's really funny. Look at her body language and then listen to her answer. And I'm going to tell you what I think's wrong with the answer, but here we go.
Did the public service put forth to you more than one option? I take your point that they said this is the best option. Did you ask, are there other options, and what's your evaluation on them?
And as I shared at Finance Committee, yes, I did ask a lot of questions, many questions, and a lot of back and forth has taken place. And I know that the public service, I have confidence that they did their due diligence, and if that was the recommendation they were coming forward with, ultimately after the scrutiny that my team and many others provided, we accepted their recommendation.
So the question isn't like, did you have lots of questions and robust conversations with your team? That's not the question, but that's the answer. That's the question she's answering. Yeah, we had lots of questions. We had lots of talk about options. And ultimately, it was just We Charity that was the option. That was it. It was only just We Charity. But we had lots of conversations. This is somebody trying to cover her ass after realizing that she didn't do the full job that she should have done. Even the basic questions that she should have asked, she didn't ask. Right? And that is illustrated by this scandal being huge. Like, this scandal is blowing up. Massive. It's a big scandal. Again, it's easy to understand. It looks really criminal. It's the third one. And the government is doing exactly what it always does. We've got so much to learn. We really regret what happened. He said sorry. Where's Trudeau? This is the funniest thing. Like, I mean, here's a preview of what Prime Minister Freeland is going to look like in the run-up to the 2023 election. I think that's probably where we're going, unless they parachute Mark Carney in. I've heard rumors about that. I don't think that's going to happen. I think that's highly unlikely. But maybe not. Maybe. I mean, Freeland would play ball. I don't know that she wants the power. Maybe she does. And it's the same people in charge, right? Like, you've seen the pictures with Freeland in the room, Trudeau in the room, and Soros in the room. That's concerning, right? That's concerning, just being aware of what George Soros did to the British pound, knowing his history. I mean, my goodness, that's a very concerning alignment. And so I think that even if the leadership of the Liberal Party changes, the policies don't change direction, right? We're stuck with this until the Canadian public votes it out. And will that happen? I have no idea. Here's Ms. Freeland outlining that she's sorry and Trudeau's sorry about how this happened. He's not sorry. Pay attention to the language. The language really matters. It really matters because people talk about it in a way, like, how you talk about something is how you think about something. What you articulate is real. I don't know a better way to say it. There are things you think in your head and then you don't say and they don't happen, right? If you think to yourself, I'm going to make a sandwich, and then you don't go make a sandwich, the sandwich never materializes. Same with that book you never wrote or whatever, right? So things that stay in your head stay in your head, and things that get articulated, things that get spoken are real. And, well, the way they use the language here is apologist for Trudeau. And not taking responsibility, not even like vicariously taking responsibility for him, right? They're saying he's sorry for how this whole thing happened. He's not sorry for his role in it. Maybe he's sorry he didn't recuse. But how could he recuse? This whole thing was his idea. I'm sure. Everybody's squirming. We're all responsible for this equally. Every one of us. Yes, all the Liberals are responsible for Minister Chagger's department. Right, sure. Here's Minister Freeland. I'm sorry for the waylay into my thoughts about thinking. I really do think that's how humans think. And we're group thinkers, right? We think about things as a group, right? We bounce ideas around and then you kind of synthesize your idea and then that's kind of what you believe. That's how I think things work. Anyway, regardless, here's Miss Freeland apologizing for herself and apologizing for how things went for Trudeau.
As the Prime Minister has said, I think all of us, everyone in our government, everyone in the cabinet, bears responsibility for this situation. And I'd like to say, speaking for myself, that I accept that responsibility, and I very much regret what has happened. And I'd like to say to Canadians, I'm really sorry. We have so many huge issues facing our country. Clearly, our government made a mistake, and I want to say to people, we're going to learn from it. In terms of how the situation was discussed, I think all Canadians knew that the Prime Minister and his family had been involved with WE. I think there are very, very many Canadians across the country who have had connections with WE, whether it's school children in elementary schools across the country or lots of other Canadians. When it comes to the specific financial connections, the Prime Minister has been very clear with Canadians that he apologizes and regrets how the situation developed.
It's like, I'm sorry you feel bad about that. And I think that it's really funny how Freeland says all Canadians knew. Did you know? Did you know that Trudeau was paying his mom through WE? Did you know that? Did you know that WE was paying his mom? Did you know that when Trudeau invited them to speak on Canada Day weekend in 2017, his mom was being paid for that appearance? Isn't that something that it's odd to assume that Canadians would know, as it wasn't really reported in the press and it wasn't really part of the lexicon, wasn't part of the liberal, like, we as an extension of the Liberal Party, like this is our propaganda arm, right? Like, no, that's not what was done. That's not what was said. And then she says, lots of Canadians have connections to WE. Everybody's got connections to WE. If you're in a school, you've got connections to WE. But those people aren't in charge of tax dollars being funneled to WE. So yeah, maybe a lot of people have connections to WE. They're not in charge of a country's $1 billion that can then be funneled towards their buddy for like property, it looks like. Right? Isn't it just wild? Isn't it wild? And it's not just a conservative scandal. This is happier days when Andrew Scheer poses with Craig and Mark Kielberger. Oh, it was Craig, not Michael. Craig and Mark. The guy's name was Mark. Oh, I should have known that. My brother's name is Mike. Oh, well. Anyway, one of my brothers. I've got lots of brothers. Okay, here is Project Sidewinder. In Project Sidewinder, and I have reported on Project Sidewinder a bunch. Project Sidewinder is a Canadian RCMP and OPP, I believe, joint investigation into Chinese infiltration into major businesses and major strategic points in other countries' businesses in order to put pressure on politics and whatever and have influence, right? Because that's what spycraft is all about, influencing things for your country's gain. Okay, so here's an example used in the introduction to Project Sidewinder, the forward, and here it is, kind of the summary of the whole thing. Here it is, quote, as an example, a Canadian company under Chinese influence was in contention for a contract to set up and run a classified communication system linking the main agencies of the Canadian intelligence community. A company in Toronto specializing in video surveillance was originally Canadian, not a Canadian, but was bought by a Chinese multinational. It is impossible at present to say how many or which Canadian companies are in the same situation. These examples, however, raise questions about the integrity of some companies that have already installed security systems for various Canadian government institutions or Canadian research industries. Insidious, right? And here is the National Post today. Chinese government-owned firm wins $6.8 million contract to supply security equipment to Canada's embassies. You know, they were so sick and tired of being sneaky about it in 1997. That's when Sidewinder was released. They're just bringing it into the open, right? They're just doing it out in plain sight. Just, you know, we're just going to bid on the contract and hope that the government gives it to us. And you know those two Michaels? Right? Here's the article. The government of Canada has awarded an estimated $6.8 million contract to a state-owned Chinese company to supply security equipment for 170 embassies, consulates, and high commissions around the globe. The contract for conveyor-style X-ray machines was awarded to Beijing-based New Tech company, Nuc Tech, a company owned by the Chinese government and founded by the son of former General Secretary of the Chinese Communist Party, Hu Jintao. Nuc Tech is known as the Huawei of airport security, supplying X-ray machines, scanners, and explosive detection systems to airports and customs offices in 160 countries. You know what? I can't wait until they get the municipal contracts. Do you guys feel safer? Do you want to go into your libraries going through Chinese security scanners? Why not? Let's just expand. Let's let Chinese companies expand their operations all in Canada. We're testing their vaccines anyway. Why not? Maxime Bernier says, I asked last week after the Wii scandal if we could officially declare Canada a banana republic. We could also as well recognize that we've become a Chinese province. And he's talking about the same thing that I'm talking about. Very crazy. Lots of people ask me to do PPC updates. Mark Freeland did an interview yesterday with Maxime Bernier, and if you want an update, have a look at that. There you go. I've been busy. Honestly, I've got parenting and this whole thing to do. I've been busy, so I don't have any robust updates. I've tried. I don't have any robust updates. Apologies, but that's what he's talking about. There you go. Check it out. And he did an interview yesterday. So, hey, who knows? Got to get organized. If it's this bad now, right? Like, what is it going to take? What is it going to take? She's not going to win the next election, right? And unless Peter McKay walks in and then they replace both leaders again. I don't know. There's lots going on, and it's very interesting. Here is moving into municipalities. This is kind of not a throwaway, but just something to mention. Feds to provide $19 billion to help provinces, municipalities restart economies. The municipalities in Ontario requested $10 billion from the province and the feds in order to get things back to even, to replace the lost revenues and the lost tax revenues. There's people who are defaulting on mortgages and not paying property taxes, et cetera, because they can't, right? And so because of that, and cities can't run deficits. So in order to balance their books, they have to lay people off. There's no other. Payroll is the biggest expense for a municipality, right? So cutting programs and services is a stopgap until they can get some funding. So I'm glad that there is funding, but there's one taxpayer, right? There's one taxpayer. There's not 4 or 5 taxpayers. There's one taxpayer. Here's an interesting one from Alberta. July 16th, today's the 17th. Lethbridge drug site, a shocking mess uncovered. A shocking mess, all the more shocking because of whose mess it is. Those who claim to be doing what they're doing for the most unselfish reasons. Those running the drug consumption site in Lethbridge, one of 7 in the province and a royal pain in the butt, like the drug site is going to show in Calgary. Like the drug site gong show in Calgary. A drug site exec makes $94,744 in 2017, gets $207,830 in 2018, and $342,943 in 2019. What's that about? And I'm assuming that's talking about salary. There's $1.6 million out the door, but where's the paperwork? The records are not maintained, records not located, control on credit cards is weak, the books are a mess, money from Alberta taxpayers and cash for other sources are mixed together, so it's hard to trace which dough is being spent on what. They can't even account properly for petty cash. There's $13,000 for staff retreats, entertainment, and gift cards. That's more than $1,000 a month. Think about that. That's massive. I have a link as well on CanadaReport.co to the actual full report on the from Alberta. I came across it separately, but it's the Arches report on this Arches facility in Lethbridge. And man, very interesting reading. Very interesting. You should probably check it out. Here's another interesting thing from yesterday. A federal judge says the Canadian Security Intelligence Service, CSIS, failed to disclose its reliance on information that was likely collected illegally when seeking warrants to probe extremism. I wonder which extremism. Here's London. If you live in London, Ontario, this is one of your councillors. She is her downtown city councillor in London, Ontario. And she says, although this went by quietly, I'd like to highlight that with the help of Mohammed Mosaleh, sorry if I got that wrong, and Jesse Helmer, we passed a unanimous motion to bring anti-racism lens to the city budget and service all areas and policies at the City of London. Thank you to the 1,000+ people who helped push this. And if you know anything about anti-racism, I've been talking about this anti-racism stuff. I'm still reading. I need a PDF annotator. Any recommendation would work. Something live, something that's light, and that saves the annotations, because I want to do this with how to be an anti-racist and maybe even white fragility, just because I'd like to hear what they're trying to say. I'd like to understand exactly how they're articulating their not their formulas, but their philosophy, and like understand it. And from what I understand, basically, if you're not actively fighting against racism in a prescribed way, you're racist. But also in white fragility, and I read a whole report about this. In white fragility, they talk about how it's like you're darned if you do and darned if you don't, right? Like if you say hi to somebody of another race or whatever, then that's, I don't know. There was a whole kind of matrix that they had made up. I shared it on Twitter if you're interested in reading it. It was a column on the white fragility book. But I think that this anti-racist thing is a very, very dangerous, slippery slope. What we're looking for is people to be judged by who they are, not by the color of their skin. And this anti-racist thing prioritizes judging everyone by the color of their skin, because if you're white, you're inherently racist. That's the basic premise of this whole thing. And that's why I need to understand it. That's why I need to read the books, because if you can't understand what they're trying to say, you can't fight against it. You can't have an intelligent conversation with them, because you can't speak their language. You can't talk their magic words, right? Oh my goodness, I'm already at 20 minutes. I'm almost at the end, guys. It's almost at the end. Here's that interview I was talking about with Maxime Bernier, so link will be in the description. Yeah, I think this is important stuff to talk about, because like I said earlier, if you articulate something, it happens, right? If you get up and make the sandwich, it comes into reality, it comes into existence. If you articulate something, if you want to engage somebody in this conversation, you have to be able to articulate, you have to play the game they're playing. You have to articulate your views in their language. Man, it's tough. And like, when you don't even know the language, when you reject it, when you look at it and say, this is a bunch of racist rantings, basically. And I think I'm 3 chapters in. And I'm not trying to generalize. There are some pieces in there that maybe if you have a conversation around, and this is how to be an anti-racist, maybe you can have a conversation around certain things. But basically, if somebody were to make the statements made in both of these books, and I haven't read White Fragility, but if somebody were to make those statements about other races in Canada or in the West, they would be widely panned. They would be taken down. Everybody would be upset. People would be angry. But for some reason, this is okay to say about white people, right? Like, all systems white people create are inherently racist because they're created by white people. What a thing to say, right? How could you then, if that is the statement, how could you then say to somebody who is white within that system, anything that you build is tainted with racism? So anything that you build is always going to be inherently bad, always. There's no formula for how to address this. There's no pathway out of this original sin, right? It's a very, very insidious philosophy, and unless you understand it, unless you can look at it and say, this is what you think, and this is why I think you're mistaken, then you're not even part of the conversation. And they're doing this. Look at this language. And if you don't understand it, in order to fight it, you need to. And that's unfortunate, but that's where we're at. Okay, thanks for watching, everybody. Check out CanadaPoly.com. Check out CanadaReport.co. Check out SpeakingMoistly.co. I know. And have a wonderful, wonderful